You're probably familiar with the fact that white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, white cells, are those that help protect us from antigens, pathogens that cause disease, allergens that cause hypersensitivity reactions, cancer cells. They help us get rid of dead or injured or infected cells, and they direct the immune response, as in how do we respond to these foreign invaders to the body. So who are these foreign invaders? Let's take a look at a couple of them. Here's an array of pathogens that you might find in your plasma. Some of these you might be familiar with: pig tapeworm, beef tapeworm. Some of the other ones are found in infected waters, liver flukes, malarial parasites invading red blood cells, or parasitic worms. In this case, they are being attacked by eosinophils, a specific type of white blood cell. So a diff test, or a white blood cell differential count, can give us some information about what might be the source of infection or the source of allergy. It doesn't tell us what it is, but if we see variations from normal values, such as these, then we can have a clue in what direction to keep looking. So all formed elements start as this hemocytoblast cell. It's a stem cell from which all blood cells are made, or all formed elements are made. The myeloid line gives rise to the erythrocytes and the granulocyte leukocytes. The lymphoid line gives rise to the monocytes and the lymphocytes. So now let's take a look specifically at white blood cell special features and what each of these cell lines do for us. White blood cells have a couple of special capabilities. One of those is diapedesis, which means, as you can see in this picture, they have the ability to squeeze through spaces that exist, very small spaces, between the simple squamous cells that make up the walls of a blood vessel. They also exhibit positive chemotaxis, which means as chemicals are put down by injured cells or injured tissues, they act sort of like chemical red breadcrumbs that draw the white blood cells to them. A normal human body's population of these different blood cells looks like this. So granulocytes are white blood cells that contain visible granules, and those granules contain chemicals that often help the blood cell do its work. Agranulocytes may have granules, they do, we just can't see them when they're stained, so we call them agranulocyte, non-granule looking cells. Neutrophils, the most common of the white blood cells, are highly phagocytic, much like monocytes. And here's a quick reminder of what phagocytosis looks like: the engulfing of an antigen by a red blood cell, or sorry, white blood cell in this case. They tend to be the first of the white blood cells that arrive at a site of infection, and once they've phagocytized debris or a microorganism that's pathogenic to us, they use what's called a respiratory burst. So they use hydrogen peroxide-like compounds, bleach-like compounds that do the same to the bacterial or microorganism cells that they would do to us. It causes those microorganisms to burst, to die, so that they're not harmful to us anymore. And then we take those pieces and we can move them out of the body through the kidneys. You may see pyuria, pus in the urine, or this infected cell, or the neutrophil, can be engulfed by another cell. The next of the granulocytes are the eosinophils. These are really pretty cells to see in the lab. They have these bright pink granules. They don't really tend to be phagocytic, as you saw in that video at the beginning, they excrete chemicals that dissolve a microorganism, something like a worm or a multicellular parasite that's usually too big to be engulfed. But they can also help moderate allergic reactions with basophils by releasing histamines that help promote the inflammatory process. Basophils, the least numerous of all of the white blood cells. Sometimes we call them unicorns if we're looking at them, trying to find them in the lab, because generally there are so few that they're hard to find in blood smears. Their principal functions are to release histamine, which is an inflammatory chemical, promotes that redness, swelling, pain, heat at a site of infection or invasion. And they also secrete heparin, which is a natural anticoagulant, and that helps to keep the flow of blood with other chemicals that help us fight infection in other cells coming to that area of infection. And lastly, histamine also helps to cause vasodilation. So along with not coagulating the blood at the injury site because of heparin, the histamine helps to keep the blood vessels nice and open so that the flow of blood happens continuously. So we're going to now move on to the agranulocytes, but just because they don't have visible granules doesn't mean that they're less important. These are in fact two of the most important and most numerous of the white blood cells. Lymphocytes, and we'll talk much more about these in the immune system, are cells that help to run the immune system functions. So they're a little bit larger than RBCs, but you can see significant variations in these, especially in cancers, especially bone marrow cancers. So there are two varieties of lymphocytes. There are T cells or T lymphocytes and B cells or B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes, their main job is to produce antibodies, but they can also serve as antigen-presenting cells. T lymphocytes, or T cells, are what we call the generals of the immune system army. They're the ones that send out cytokines, specialized chemicals that tell other cells what to do when the body is attacked or invaded. They also will help recruit other cells, and they further tell the innate immune responses like fever and inflammation and complement, ramp up your actions. Let's really go hard and attack this antigen so it causes us the least amount of damage possible. And lastly, there's the monocytes. So monocytes, when they're in the blood, are called monocytes. When they leave the blood and go reside in the tissues, like dendritic cells that you've seen in the integumentary system, they live in the dermis of the skin. At that point, they're called macrophages, which means big eaters. And these are highly voracious phagocytes. And one of the things that makes them really voracious is when an infected cell or an invading microbe is opsonized or quote unquote frosted with antibodies. They love that. That makes things even better for them. They're much more likely to phagocytize that particular antigen. So their job is really like security guards. They serve as what are called antigen presenting cells. And what that means is that they are looking around the body, surveilling for antigens. When they find those antigens, they engulf them through phagocytosis, or if it's a lipid or sorry, a liquid. They will use pinocytosis to engulf that antigen, and then they put a piece of it on the outside of themselves in the form of an MHC protein. And yes, we'll come back to this in the immune system. This is just a preview. So these are the three types of cells we'll look at later that are considered antigen-presenting cells. Who are they presenting to? T lymphocytes, those very important, very intelligent generals of the immune system army, have a fatal flaw. And the fatal flaw is that a T cell cannot see an antigen directly. The only way it can see the antigen on a cellular level is to have this dendritic cell, a resident macrophage in the skin, or a macrophage, or a B cell present a piece of an antigen that was eaten up by one of these cells to the T cell. This MHC protein is a particular kind of protein that holds a piece of that antigen right here, takes it to the T cell and says, I have this awful thing, but I can't really do anything about it, sort of like an eyewitness. So then the T cell will start doing all of its functions that help to protect us from further damage by this invader. We can also use the power of the human body in terms of how does it make blood cells, and in particular, white blood cells in a process called leukapheresis. So leukapheresis, the formation of white blood cells in the bone marrow, is stimulated by several chemicals. One is a class called interleukins, another is a class called colony-stimulating factors. And one of the things that scientists have been researching quite a bit is immunotherapy. How do we harness the body's own natural, well-proven, and successful power? Here's an example of interleukins used in the medical field. So in this particular case, it's been found that interleukin-2, there are several different versions of interleukins and subversions, have been proven to be really effective treatments in kidney cancers and metastatic melanomas, so melanoma skin cancers that spread. Of course, as have all medications, there are certainly side effects, and as you can see, there's continuing research being done in harnessing our body's own power and utilizing what we already know works effectively and just ramping up those reactions.